Robert Sapolsky. Are we truly free? The impact of our primitive instincts in modern life. Freedom or instinct? What drives us? Today, I want to tell you about an unusual book that explores scientific articles on the behavior of both humans and animals. The author, renowned scientist Robert Sapolsky, presents research showing just how closely human behavior is tied to biology. I was especially struck by how scientists compare our behavior to that of animals, which helps us gain a deeper understanding of ourselves. Behavioral biology is becoming an increasingly relevant topic in our world. For instance, in the past, criminals were judged without considering their psychological issues. Nowadays, we're more often realizing that their actions could be the result of complex brain processes triggered by hormones or diseases. It turns out that our thoughts and actions directly influence what happens inside our bodies, and conversely, biochemical processes in the body can drastically change our mood and worldview. Have you ever thought about how society's attitude toward people with mental illnesses has changed over the last 100 years? Previously, they were treated with methods that resembled torture more than healing: lobotomies, ice baths, restraints. But now, scientists use medications that adjust brain function at the neurotransmitter level. It's also fascinating how our perception of faith and fantasies has shifted. For example, excessive fascination with religion, belief in UFOs, or zodiac signs can be classified as a schizotypal personality disorder. Of course, this doesn't mean banning horoscopes. It's more about cases where these beliefs become obsessive. Research also shows a link between genetics and mental disorders. For instance, children adopted by healthy parents but with biological ties to schizophrenia can display signs of magical thinking, much like their biological relatives. It's amazing how much a person's personality can change due to a brain injury. For example, patients with damage to their frontal lobes can show dramatic changes in behavior, from modesty to aggression, or, on the other hand, becoming overly talkative. People with temporal lobe epilepsy experience abnormal bursts of brain activity, which can lead to a fascination with philosophy and religion. I was struck by how scientists discovered that certain parts of the brain can influence our preferences, thoughts, and even the clothing we choose. Depending on where these bursts occur, a person may lean toward religious beliefs, prefer a certain dish, or even wear the same type of clothing repeatedly. What do you think of these discoveries? Have you heard of similar research or changes in approaches to mental health? Share your thoughts on the connection between biology and our behavior in the comments. Human behavior is indeed directly tied to the biology of the brain, which can be influenced by many factors. For example, obsessive-compulsive disorder manifests as persistent worries, such as whether someone thoroughly washed their hands or locked the door. Nowadays, doctors look not only at childhood experiences, but also at genetics and specific brain regions that might cause such disorders. It's important to understand that there's a fine line between normal doubts, like wondering if you turned off the iron, and serious mental disorders that require a diagnosis. A completely healthy person may have traits similar to those associated with mental illness, but that doesn't mean they're unwell. Likewise, a person might have a schizotypal personality, but this doesn't necessarily indicate a schizophrenia diagnosis. One interesting example is recent research that identified differences between heterosexual and homosexual men. It found that homosexual men have a brain region responsible for sexuality that is smaller than in heterosexual men, resembling the size of this area in women. However, there are nuances. The sample size was small, and the participants had AIDS, which could have influenced the results. Do you think such studies give an accurate picture, or are they just another step toward understanding the brain? It's worth considering how one decision can drastically change our perception of norms. For instance, homophobia was once considered a mental illness, but after a medical decision, it ceased to be classified that way. In an instant, millions of people worldwide were considered perfectly healthy. This raises questions about how science shapes our understanding of normality. Understanding that some people have biological limitations beyond their control helps us be more tolerant and understanding. After all, we're not so different from primates. No matter how much we try to avoid gossip, we still behave like primates, closely watching others' conflicts or celebrities' personal lives. The author describes scenes where powerful male primates fight, and despite the danger, other primates gather to watch, just like humans. Researchers have found that puberty is also influenced by external factors. For example, animals mature faster if an adult male is nearby, as pheromones stimulate the female's body to develop more quickly. On the other hand, if only females are around and no males are present, the process slows down. Studies also suggest that in humans, the timing of puberty can vary depending on circumstances. For example, girls may reach maturity sooner if they grow up in families where parents argue or are divorced. Have you ever thought about how biological processes can profoundly influence human behavior and development? How do you think social and biological factors interact with each other? Share your thoughts in the comments. Studies on early puberty are indeed controversial. For instance, when girls from conflict-ridden families or those with divorced parents reach maturity 5 months earlier, it could be linked to weight gain, as children tend to eat more in such situations. However, stress can also lead to the opposite effect. Children may eat less, which can delay puberty. This issue is of concern to American doctors, as teen pregnancies remain a significant social issue in the United States. Can this situation be attributed to biological factors, or is it the result of aggressive sexual advertising and media influence? It's essential to note that although early puberty in girls may appear to be a response to unsuitable conditions, these studies require further validation. Independent scientists need to replicate the experiments so that we can talk about concrete facts, not just theories. On the other hand, if conditions are unfavorable for survival and reproduction, a child's body might delay puberty, as seen in animals. In stable conditions, both males and females aim to develop fully to ensure quality care for their offspring later. For example, elephants, with pregnancies lasting nearly 2 years, invest in their offspring, favoring quality over quantity. In unstable ecosystems, however, animals tend to reproduce as soon as possible, without concern for what might happen to their offspring. This is an example of an opportunistic approach to survival, where the goal is to make use of a short window of favorable conditions. Another interesting social aspect to consider is the death penalty in the United States. In some states, a system is used where 2 people press buttons to deliver the lethal injection. Only one button actually works and no one knows which one. This process ensures that neither person feels directly responsible for the death, as they can believe it wasn't their action that caused it. This psychology of shared responsibility has historical roots. For example, in the 19th century, firing squads of 5 men were used for executions, with each person firing a single shot, distributing the responsibility for the act among all participants to alleviate individual guilt. The same logic applies in business and ecology. A factory owner who dumps waste into a river might argue that the pollution only raises cancer risks by 0.03%, choosing not to think about the real-life harm it might cause. When it comes to positive outcomes, however, we tend to think that improvements have a high likelihood of success. This psychological trick allows us to downplay the impact of bad actions while exaggerating the significance of good ones. In the past, the American legal system could find 2 arsonists innocent even if they both set fire to a train from opposite sides. One could argue that the train would have burned down anyway because of the other, and vice versa. However, over time, courts started viewing the situation from the victim's perspective. For them, it doesn't matter that the blame is shared between 2 people. The outcome is the same. This led to significant changes, and now anyone who causes damage can be held accountable, even if there are multiple culprits or a large corporation involved. Robert Sapolsky highlights that, in earlier times, a single scientist could solve a major problem and benefit many people, like the eradication of smallpox. Today, however, progress requires massive teams, and improvements are achieved in minute increments. Scientists working in labs sometimes lack an emotional connection with the outcomes of their work, unlike doctors who witness patients' improvements in real time. However, experiments on animals, which scientists are often forced to conduct, bring about serious moral dilemmas. Separating children from parents is an essential stage of maturation for both humans and primates. This process differs across species. Males or females may leave the group to avoid inbreeding. Primates that leave their troop experience stress and adapt to a new group gradually. Young males often find themselves in the position of outsiders, with no friends or support, and are sometimes targeted by others trying to assert their own status. This behavior mirrors what we see among teenagers at school. Newcomers often become targets of mockery or aggression, and stronger teens may try to assert their status at their expense. Sapolsky describes an incident where a large adolescent male joined a troop and began displaying aggression, attacking pregnant females, which led to miscarriages. His behavior contradicted the usual animal strategy, since it harmed the entire troop. However, his instincts guided his actions. Miscarriages in females accelerated ovulation, allowing him to mate with them sooner. Interestingly, the dominant males in the troop did not intervene, hiding behind the females. Scientists took blood samples from the aggressive adolescent and found his cortisol levels, a stress hormone, were higher than those he was attacking. He was under significant stress, but he chose aggression as a tactic, trying to seize leadership quickly rather than moving up the hierarchy slowly. The adolescent baboon attempting to seize leadership soon lost his power, though he remained third in rank. This example illustrates that newcomers in groups, whether at school, university, or work, sometimes seek leadership by using methods available within our society. However, their attempts are often short-lived, and eventually, their position becomes more stable but less dominant. Interestingly, adolescent primates leave their troop despite having everything they need for a comfortable life: family, friends, a familiar environment, food, and water. No one drives them away, and there are no visible reasons to leave. Yet, they are driven by curiosity, a desire to learn something new and experience new sensations. Just like humans, young primates seek new experiences, even if they come with risks. They don't consciously consider biological factors like the genetic consequences of inbreeding. They're simply driven by interest. Interest is a powerful driver of progress in humans as well. Young minds more easily absorb new ideas, and it's adolescent primates who bring change to the life of the troop by trying new things and pushing the boundaries of what's possible. When we face the loss of loved ones, our grief passes through 5 stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Although each person's experience is unique, these stages provide a common framework for those dealing with loss. Similar universal stages are also found in the development of moral consciousness. At the first level of moral development, a child is guided by rules, punishments, and rewards, seeing the world through a give-and-take lens. At the second level, an adult accepts societal laws and follows them as unquestionable standards. But at the third level, personal values and beliefs begin to form, and one starts critically evaluating the moral standards that society upholds. However, not everyone reaches this level. Robert Sapolsky mentions Theodore Kaczynski, a former prodigy who sent bombs to universities and airlines in protest against scientific and technological progress. Although many intellectuals feel isolated or misunderstood at some point, Kaczynski's actions shocked even his colleagues, as intellectuals rarely resort to such extreme measures. Yet, within the scientific community, there was a sense of empathy and even hidden pride. Many had likely once felt misunderstood and wronged. Sapolsky poses a question: what is the difference between those who order the destruction of an entire village and those who simply follow the order? How are they different from Kaczynski, who chose his own path of resistance? While scientists might find something relatable in him, there is a vast chasm between his actions and their work. This also raises the question of norms. Who defines them, and can something considered normal be pathological? For example, anatomists long studied the bodies of impoverished people, and due to chronic illnesses and poor nutrition, their organs were regarded as the norm. This led to treatments for conditions that were actually just consequences of poverty and stress. Mistakes in such studies came at the cost of lives. Interestingly, few people think about donating their body to science, though it could benefit future generations. Have you decided what will happen to your body after death? An example from the baboons observed by Sapolsky is also interesting. When a garbage pit appeared near their troop, the animals' behavior changed. Baboons used to wake up at dawn, spending most of their time searching for food. But with the trash available, they began waking up later and found food within minutes, adapting to a new, easier way of survival. When scientists began studying the cholesterol levels in baboons that were eating from the garbage pit, their levels turned out to be significantly higher compared to those leading a natural lifestyle. This was due to two factors. The baboons near the garbage pit were no longer as active as their counterparts, and, of course, they were consuming human food waste. These changes soon began to negatively affect the health of the troop. Although the study doesn't cover the long-term effects of this diet, it's clear that these baboons face illnesses similar to those seen in humans. Initially, the presence of the garbage pit led to a population increase within the troop. Food was readily available, which sped up sexual maturity, helped young baboons grow faster, and increased the frequency of ovulation. But soon, the troop faced a serious issue. Many baboons contracted an infection from the pit, resulting in the death of half the group. This situation with the baboons reflects some of humanity's modern dilemmas. On one hand, we've achieved significant advances in medicine, technology, and education, contributing to population growth. On the other hand, in developed countries, we see declining birth rates, an aging population, and the emergence of new diseases caused by environmental pollution and poor diet. It all depends on how we evaluate this progress and what conclusions we draw. When it comes to stress, it's essential for the body to respond appropriately to different situations. A bad grade on an exam is one type of stress, while encountering bullies on the street is another. The body needs to react differently to each stressor. Otherwise, constant strain on the cardiovascular system can lead to serious problems. People dealing with depression often find it difficult to cope with even minor challenges, and their stress responses may seem disproportionate to the situation. High achievers, or type of individuals who are always striving to be first, also tend to react aggressively to stressful situations. They may lose their temper easily when things don't go as planned. It's especially challenging for those who believe that any problem can be solved through sheer effort. If they live in a society where social inequality and injustice are common, their constant struggle leads to chronic stress. Another group of people shows high stress resilience in tests and appears calm and confident. These individuals carefully plan their lives, control everything, but still experience elevated stress hormone levels. They suppress their emotions so effectively that they appear perfectly organized outwardly, yet inside, they are constantly tense. These are so-called repressed personalities, who expend tremendous energy creating the appearance of a stress-free life while actually subjecting themselves to even greater stress. Experiments demonstrate this well. People who had to suppress their emotions during stressful situations showed much higher stress hormone levels than those who could freely express their emotions. An interesting conclusion from Sapolsky is his claim that testosterone doesn't cause aggression itself, it only amplifies its expression. This is a controversial statement, as removing the testosterone source, such as through castration, does reduce aggression, though not to zero. Likewise, introducing testosterone doesn't cause aggression to appear spontaneously, but if aggression does arise, it becomes more intense. Continuing his observations of baboons, Sapolsky draws further fascinating conclusions related to their behavior and stress responses. For example, in adolescence, primates, male or female, voluntarily migrate to other troops, unlike other animals where young males are forced out by older ones due to competition. Interestingly, migration sometimes happens even in later life, typically when a male faces aggression from both high-ranking and low-ranking members of his troop. In such cases, he prefers to try his chances at a higher rank in a new troop. What's especially surprising is that some males migrate even in old age. This decision seems irrational, as an older male has virtually no chance of rising in rank in a new troop, and adjusting to new conditions becomes even harder. Scientists have proposed several theories. Some suggest that these older males return to their original troops to live out their lives among sisters and relatives. Another theory posits that daughters reaching sexual maturity drive them out to prevent inbreeding. The most likely explanation, however, is that young baboons, now at the top of the hierarchy, remember that these older males were once ranked above them. In their later years, life for the older males becomes unbearable due to mistreatment from the younger ones. With no remaining allies in their troop, these baboons would rather leave and face indifference in a new group than endure constant aggression in their own. Interestingly, Only half of the older males leave their troops, while the other half remain. It turned out that those who left had previously built alliances based on pragmatic interests, not friendships. These alliances helped them stay on top, but by old age, these baboons found themselves without support. Those who stayed had formed genuine friendships, often with females, and didn't seek dominance. Their bonds with females weren't necessarily based on mating. These were true friendships built on mutual support, shared care for young, and play. Unlike males, females did not establish hierarchies and felt more at ease. Their friendliness and social skills helped strengthen troop bonds. This is a reminder of human relationships. Women tend to live longer and remain surrounded by friends, whereas men are more often left alone. As with primates, quality of life in old age largely depends on social bonds formed throughout one's life. Other observations about primates are equally fascinating. For instance, scientists have noted that chimpanzees place certain plant leaves under their tongues and swallow them without chewing. These leaves pass through their systems undigested, yet they have the ability to kill parasites. This raises the question, how did the chimpanzees discover these properties in plants? It's another mystery of nature. Rats, after ingesting poison, instinctively eat clay to induce vomiting and cleanse their bodies. If they're low on thiamine, they're more likely to sample new foods, even though animals generally avoid unfamiliar foods to prevent poisoning. Interestingly, rats tend to learn from each other. If one rat observes others eating a new food, it feels safe to try it as well. Studies on chimpanzees that consume leaves daily to combat parasites have generated a lot of interest. Scientists suspect that animals might imitate each other's actions, though it's still unknown whether the active ingredients in these leaves are sufficient to effectively kill parasites. There's still the question of whether the dosage is truly enough for treatment. Researchers once believed that animals need a short time between cause and effect to understand a connection. However, further studies have shown that animals can link their actions to results even after considerable time has passed. For example, when an animal feels unwell, it may try something new, remembering what helped relieve its symptoms. This process allows them to develop certain self-healing strategies. It's also important to consider that animals often mimic the behavior of other group members. If one eats something new, others are likely to follow its lead and begin eating it regularly. These observations remind us to be cautious in concluding that primates possess knowledge about disease treatment. While impressive examples exist, scientists are still far from definitive answers. However, there is much we can learn from animals, particularly in the area of instinctive self-medication. Robert Sapolsky's reflections on the impact of Western civilization on African tribes are also thought-provoking. When Westerners attempt to help, such as by digging wells for nomadic tribes, it often results in negative consequences. The tribes settle around the water source, their livestock depletes vegetation, leading to desertification and the spread of disease. With large numbers of people and animals gathering in one place and limited sanitation, epidemics can arise. Another negative effect of interaction with Western civilization is a change in diet. Indigenous people, who are accustomed to limited supplies of salt, sugar, and water, suddenly face an overabundance of these elements, leading to increased cases of diabetes and hypertension. These dietary changes occur quickly and cause much more severe health problems than those faced by populations adapted to such diets. Sapolsky also emphasizes that stress plays a key role in worsening the health of the local population. Men travel to cities for work, leaving their families in villages. They only see their wives and children 1 month a year, adding to the tension and stress. Career opportunities are also limited. Top positions are reserved for relatives of the chiefs, while talented young people may remain in lower ranks with little chance to change their situation. Still, this adaptation process might go more smoothly for future generations, both for local populations and those who have migrated to more developed countries. One of the topics in Sapolsky's book explores the question, why do we feel so unwell when we're sick? All the symptoms we associate with illness, fever, loss of appetite, muscle aches, weakness, and drowsiness, feel like standard responses. We take them for granted. Yet it raises the question, why does our body make us feel so uncomfortable? Studies on cold-blooded animals like reptiles have shown that when sick, they instinctively seek out warmer areas, despite typically preferring moderate temperatures when healthy. When sick reptiles are deprived of a warm environment and forced to remain in the cold, their survival rates drop. This supports the idea that fever is an essential defense mechanism. A higher temperature helps the lymphatic system produce antibodies more quickly, while slowing down the growth of viruses and bacteria. Illness forces the body to focus all its energy on recovery, which reduces appetite and increases the need for sleep. It's an evolutionary strategy. The body conserves resources, focusing everything on fighting the infection. Medications that reduce fever and alleviate pain act on receptors that become more sensitive during illness. This sensitivity could be a natural mechanism urging us to slow down and allow the body to recover. While it's important to keep fever under control to avoid excessive spikes, overall, fever plays a significant role in the recovery process. Sapolsky also reflects on schizophrenia and schizotypal personalities. Schizophrenia is a genetic condition found across all races and continents. The question arises, if it's an illness, why hasn't it faded out through evolution? Research shows that relatives of people with schizophrenia often display schizotypal traits. They may have esoteric beliefs, eccentricities, and a literal interpretation of the world. But what could explain why genes causing schizophrenia persist in the population? Sapolsky suggests the hypothesis that shamans in ancient tribes may have carried these genes. They were respected and held power, which increased their chances of survival and reproduction. This could explain why schizophrenia genes have remained in the human population. Studies show that even in modern societies, many people believe in UFOs, ghosts, or the supernatural. This could be linked to schizotypal traits present in a significant portion of the population. I have a personal example that vividly illustrates how someone with a logical mindset, faced with illness, chose to turn to a cult rather than traditional medicine. He hoped for healing, but tragically, it led to a fatal outcome. His wife, still a cult member, believed in the possibility of resurrection and, even after her husband's death, continued searching for new sections. This raises the question, what influences people's tendency toward such beliefs? Is it genetics, or perhaps a psychological state, especially as they reach an age when fear of death intensifies? Cults often attract people who have gone through difficult events, illness, loss, or addiction. In despair, individuals seek quick solutions, and cults promise them miracles or, at the very least, comfort in the form of paradise after death. This is especially appealing to those in a depressed state who see few options for escaping their situation. Robert Sapolsky points out religious rituals which, in his view, are similar to obsessive-compulsive disorders. Every ritual involves strict rules: how to get out of bed, how to wash hands, how many times to recite prayers. These repetitive actions, common in religious traditions, can resemble the rituals characteristic of people with obsessive-compulsive disorders. Obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD, manifests when a person creates strict rituals that take up a significant part of their life and cause constant anxiety. For example, such individuals might spend hours washing, following a specific order, or repeatedly returning home to check if appliances are turned off. Their life becomes entirely subordinated to these rituals, and they believe that the outcome of their life depends on these actions. It's one thing if someone believes in a lucky shirt or a charm, but it's a completely different scenario when rituals and anxieties take over their whole life. Sapolsky argues that people with schizophrenia or schizotypal traits may have once been respected in society, and this is possibly still the case today. Charismatic religious figures who call themselves apostles create cults, often leading to negative consequences. He suggests that the founders of religions might have suffered not only from schizophrenia but also from obsessive-compulsive disorders, as evidenced by numerous rituals in religious traditions. People deeply immersed in religious ceremonies and rituals may exhibit signs of OCD. For them, the church is not just a spiritual practice, but a way to organize their lives, feel part of a system, and cope with anxiety and uncertainty. Sapolsky views this as a possible explanation for the link between religiosity and OCD. However, it's important to remember that this is just one theory. Scientists are free to propose hypotheses, and we, in turn, can form our own opinions. These studies do not aim to show that religion is a refuge for people with mental disorders. Their goal is to explore how much a person's personality is free in their choices, feelings, and beliefs. If genes and certain brain structures can influence behavior and worldviews so strongly, how can we be sure that we are completely free in our actions? While scientists have not yet found definitive answers to this question, one thing is clear. The search for an answer to one mystery often generates many new, even deeper questions. Human behavior, beliefs, and responses to illness depend heavily on how our body functions, our genetic predispositions, and the features of our brain. Our habits and actions, such as rituals in obsessive-compulsive disorder or adherence to religious traditions, can be the result of both biological mechanisms and social surroundings. Robert Sapolsky's research raises interesting questions about how much our actions are determined by free will and how much they are controlled by innate factors. We can see that throughout history, people with mental traits like schizotypal thinking or OCD may have played important roles in society, such as in religious rituals. Modern scientific research allows us to look at these phenomena from a new perspective, offering interesting hypotheses about how genes and brain structure influence our perception of the world. If you're interested in such reflections and want to dive into the world of fascinating books, subscribe to my book summary channel. Here, you'll find interesting and educational summaries that will help expand your horizons and offer new perspectives on familiar things. Don't forget to hit the bell so you won't miss new videos.